Hi, it's G-Tar Mac, and I'm hanging out with Rob on Front Row Live.
30 years since the world first heard Cry Little Sister. We're celebrating an anniversary this year. But I kind of want to know about the song. Like, what was your fondest memory creating that track?
Fondest memory, God, they came in like three parts. One being reading the script that Joel Schumacher, the director of Lost Boys, sent me when they were while they were filming the movie. He wanted me. He loved my work. He said, "Hey, would you take a shot at writing my theme song for this film?" And that I'm making right now. And so he sent me on a script, and I read it, which was kind of unusual because I've always, before that, of a few films I'd done at that time, I'd always seen the movie to get a vibe or whatever. But with this film, he sent me the script, and I read it, and I was really thought it was badass, and I thought, wow. So got up the next morning and started to muck around at the piano and my guitar and trying to get a vibe, and started to write it. I was in New York at the time. I was walking up to my studio up 6th Avenue, and I just went, everything just started to come together in my head. It's sort of, New York's a very gothic town anyway, and so I was just getting the gist of what I wanted to write about. By the time I got to the studio, it had practically been written, so yeah, between like an hour's time at home, getting the ideas formulated, walking up 6th Avenue to my studio, and it just started to flow out. And so there were three different stages of really writing the song. And then, of course, wrote the lyrics that day, but, and then just made a demo of it that night and sent it to Joel, and he loved it, and couldn't believe that I actually came up. The demo actually sounded pretty good. So, but yeah, and it was just synergy at its best with that film and the song. Yeah.
And this film basically impacted you enough that 30 years later you want to create a musical for it. What was it about the film that really got your attention, drew you in, and still to this day makes you want to work with it?
Well, when Lost Boys came out, it wasn't like a super big hit, but it was very critically acclaimed, and it had garnered an audience. But where it really started to take on a real life is when it went to VHS at the time and into DVD, and it was, Warner Brothers' best-selling DVD of all time, like number 7 best DVD seller at the time, and it's on the telly all the time, the television all the time, and about 5 years ago, I studied musical theater, so I know my stuff about that, and I thought to myself, maybe this could be a good musical. I did Fast Times at Ridgemont High years ago, and I thought that could be a great musical, but then I said, that might be a bit of a tough one, so many moving parts and what have you about a high school. But the vampire thing, I felt really I could lean into that and the whole idea of what Lost Boys was. And then I thought 5 years ago, start developing a couple of ideas here and there, and that wasn't right, this wasn't right. And then started to write some songs, started to write ideas for the book. And so then it all came together about 2-3 years ago. And I said, I'm going to make a musical album. I'm going to put the story together, get the musical album out there, and then, but before too long, people in the theater world who I've been talking to say, God, this is great stuff. We got to do this. But the idea still is to put this soundtrack out in October, and to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Lost Boys, but also, celebrate a new beginning of the next 30 years with a musical, So, so, it's still a long way to go. I mean, not that long, but the musical actually, and it's interesting because in the advent of Hamilton and American Idiot, so many people know those songs, but they've not seen the Broadway play, and I'm amazed. We thought, well, this is great. I'm amazed at how many people know these songs and never seen a play, because I lived in New York for a long time, and I pretty much made it my business to go see a play. And then I knew
you have to. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, yeah, and then of course all the songs. You go out and buy the soundtrack or whatever. But I think the reverse order of this stuff is pretty cool, because you the music, you walk into the theater, and you're really singing along with it at that stage, And
I think it's a good time for this musical as well, because I feel like this year alone, just with Hamilton alone, so many so many new, so many kids, for example, are learning what a musical is.
Yeah.
Before, musicals was mainly the adults, the older demographics, but now there's so many kids that are into these things, so it's like perfect timing for that.
That's what's great. I mean, my audience is in their 20s. They're not really kids, but but I have a 12-year-old son who knows all the lyrics to Hamilton, and who knows. And I remember as a kid, I was one of the few kids that knew all the music to all the lyrics to West Side Story before seeing the musical, which I didn't see till 2 or 3 years later with my parents. So that stuck with me, and I thought, well, that's a great way to go. To get people to know what the musical. Although West Side Story was on Broadway at that time, but not everybody can go to New York and see West Side Story, or afford to go, for that matter. So it's a good, gives you time to save your money.
Now, as you're about to release these tracks for the upcoming musical, you created new music for this. How were you able to, or what inspired you to create these new songs rather than using the same songs that were used back in 30 years ago for the film?
Well, as musicals go, I mean, I think, listen, the fans. There are certain songs that are on that soundtrack, such as "Lost in the Shadows" by Lou Gramm, and "I Still Believe" that Tim Capella did, the sax guy. And but I thought, obviously, I'm using "Cry Little Sister." I mean, that's the theme from the movie. Right. That you can't do Lost Boys without that. But in the theater, in creating a backstory to all the characters and giving them. In a movie, you don't know what anybody really did, and it didn't matter. That's the way it should have been. Yeah. But in a musical, you want to create a backstory to what David is, where he came from, and how he got to California, and for that matter, all the other vampires, and, Michael and Sam and the mother. And so we've done that, and I've done that. But so there are songs that needed to be created, which I did, to get that dialogue, get the dialogue to song, So, but I mean, there's been some conversations about maybe taking a song or two from what the actual movie did, but it still tells the same story, but you're giving it new life. I have a song called "Sleep All Day, Party All Night," which was never said in the movie, but it was the slogan that they used. And I have "Death by Stereo." I have "Be One of Us," which is what David says to Michael, but they also take on a whole other life. "Be One of Us" is basically wanting the vampire family to stick together and to be trusted, that we can trust one another. So there's all kinds of interesting ways in which, we look at David being the sort of badass rebel guy. Well, in the play, he's very lonely about being immortal. He doesn't like the idea of living forever. And then you have Laddie, who is, nobody really knows what he is, but in the musical you find out he's 1,000 years old. He's like the Peter Pan character, where he never grew older than 9, So, and there's that lack of wisdom there, and you've got David with a lot of wisdom, and he's lonely and doesn't want to live forever. It's worse than death to him, So I'm giving way too much away here.
That's fine.
But I'm not giving the ending away.
Now, as far as creating this musical, what has that experience been like for you, and what is the behind the scenes? Like, are you working with Schumacher on this musical as well? Is he advising you at all? What's that like?
Well, I mean, I sent Joel on all the music pretty recently, and he got back to me 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was frightened to no end to get that phone call back from him. And I love the man. He's brilliant. And but he gave me his blessing. He said, I mean, quote unquote, he said, "Once upon the song, once upon," he said, "I can't believe it. First of all, you've outdone yourself, and I can't believe that you created a song as equally as good as Cry Little Sister." And he says, "And I love the rest of it as well." He said, "Your Sleep All Day, Party All Night sounds like, One Direction meets Green Day. I'm not," and I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "But I'm old." And I said, "You're not old." He said, I don't, he said, "I think it's great." He says, "But but you obviously," he says, you obviously know what to do with the musical." I said, "Well, I hope." Anyway, it's still a long ways away. I mean, it seems like a lot. You look here before you know it, but it's so many moving parts to creating this, and there's so many opinions, and there's so many, and I do have a good solidified team of people, but it takes a while to get this stuff right, and there's always changes going on constantly. But I think the story I've come up with and everything and the music, I certainly am proud of it. I think I'm very tough on myself, and I can actually listen back to this music and go, I wouldn't change it. Wouldn't change that,
That's
so
good.
it is, because I'm always going like, oh, that sucks, that no, I shouldn't say always, but it's part of being an artist.
Now, as you mentioned, Once Upon, did you expect to create a song that could take the place or be in the similar realm as Cry Little Sister?
In a certain way, because it starts off with the boys singing it, just a single voice singing Once Upon Alone, and he goes into one child singing that, which sounds compelling, and then it goes into the song. So there was a bit of that, and there is a choir that sings the whole Once Upon chorus as well, in backing of me, but it's a more rocked out sort of thing when it gets to that place. And then there's a bit of I'm very inspired by Kendrick Lamar.
Oh wow, nice.
Massively. Big fan. If you're out there, know that.
That's a great inspiration.
Well, he's a massive, I've had the great fortune of had Eminem sample me on the Recovery album.
Right.
I'm a big hip hop lover, have been forever and ever. And but in the middle of Once Upon, I put this whole Kendrick Lamar-ish kind of thing where I was kind of goofing around in the studio with my engineer, and he looked at me, he said, that's dope. Are you really doing that? And I'm saying, what do you think? He said, blank, yeah. You should do that.
It's definitely going to bring younger audience for sure.
Oh, yeah, well, I think the music itself is, my audience when I go out on the road, as I said, is like in your 20s.
Yeah.
And so we've been playing these songs live, and for people hearing it for the first time and going ballistically nuts over it, it says something. Because when you're trying out material live, people are like, it's a bit like, pretty cool. This one is like, yeah. So I mean, that's good to know. Good to see, rather.
Now in that Kendrick Lamar section, how can we get Kendrick Lamar to actually be in the section with you?
Well, that'd be great. If you're out there, you're welcome to jump in on this and replace me anytime. But yeah, I mean, he's probably the master as far as I'm concerned. I probably listen to him more than any other artist at this stage. I mean, I listen to a lot of different things, obviously, but yeah,
He's
I mean,
high on the list.
High on the list because it's significant. What his rhyme from his rhyme. It's not even just his rhymes, just how he puts it together, and just the music is just mind blowing.
That's incredible.
He should do a musical.
Hey. He should do the musical with you.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that.
Now, as far as the musical goes, where are you at today with the musical? Are you still in the writing process? Like, where are we at?
With the soundtrack, yeah, we're at pretty much final mixing stages. We were really supposed to be done by the end of August, but we're implementing dialogue in between the songs so people get a gist as to what it is, much like what they did with West Side Story back in the day. And so you get a little idea, you get a dialogue between Michael and Star, between the Frog Brothers and Sam, before we go into Frog Bro Hero, which is one of the songs from the musical, which is very comical. And one of the things I must say is that what Lost Boys had was humor and horror mixed, and that's what I did. That was the hardest thing to tackle, because you keep leaning into the darker side, and every time I said, you've got to pull some humor into this thing. Yeah. So there's a lot of good humor with the Frog Brothers and Sam, and there's Death by Stereo, which is a great moment where one of the vampires get blown up in the movie, but it also in a different way in the musical. It does happen, but it's got a whole song behind it. So.
That sounds exciting. I mean, how soon can we maybe expect this musical to happen? Is that something that you're looking at for the upcoming year?
Hopefully, I wouldn't say year, but I think sometime in 18 months, a couple of years down. I mean, it's so hard to know. But I can say one thing is that the musical's definitely going to whet the appetite and wet it and wet it and wet it.
That's great.
Yeah, so I'm pleased with that. And it's not just me. I mean, as I said, performing the songs live and doing all of that is true telling as to how it's been received.
Right.
And but yeah, I think it's going to be fun.
Definitely excited for that. Now, as you are currently promoting the 30-year anniversary, you have an upcoming show in Malibu at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about the show? What can the fans expect that are coming out? Because I heard that the turnout's pretty good already.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's called Street Food Cinema, and they do a few things around this LA area. They did Dirty Dancing a few months or so ago, and it's really well done. So I'm going to be performing before the show the actual movie. That's what they do at Street Food Cinema, hence the name. And it's, massive amounts of people camping out, and it's an all-night Lost Boys camp out. And a Lost Boys Woodstock, if you will. But, I'm going to perform a show. I'm going to be playing some of the songs from the musical and performing songs of mine that other people have had hits with, and yeah, keeping it honest and real. And I take great pride in what I do live. And we've been out on the road we were in Indianapolis the other night, and it was just amazing. It's nice to see that your work is working well and received well with an audience, because you live in this vortex when you're rehearsing and going through all of that. You don't know, and then but I've been doing it long enough to have some good sensibilities about how it works, but it is working. And so Street Food Cinema in Malibu, and you just have to go to streetfoodcinema.com, and who's ever in the LA area, it'll be worth your while going, if you can still get tickets.
Right.
Yeah.